What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please make sure to do so. It is always a great help, and I would appreciate it greatly. But enough of that. Let's get into our main topics for today. First and foremost, we did have a roster move or two that took place on Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving, by the way. As you saw on my Twitter, I did enjoy very much a very delicious homemade Thanksgiving pizza, which was absolutely insane and perfect and everything I wanted it to be. Hopefully your meal was just as delicious, but we did have some Packer moves that I want to get to. We had Nate Orchard, outside linebacker, signed to the practice squad. Certainly you got to think that this is likely a move that kind of just, gives Green Bay some additional depth at edge rusher. Not sure if Rashawn Gary's going to be able to play or not. I think it's hopefully leaning in that direction, but tough to say at this point. Obviously, they are still very banged up at that position overall. So this just gives them a little bit of additional depth, and if they need to call somebody up for game day, this gives them somebody that they can certainly do so with. They also removed Kareth White as a running back from the practice squad. So that was sort of the joint move that kind of took place there. So just something to kind of keep an eye on this week as Green Bay is trying to fill their roster with enough edge rushers to go against the Rams. They now have an additional piece that could be used in break glass in case of emergency sort of situation. Who knows if he'll be completely ready to play this Sunday if needed already, but again, they need bodies at that position, and Nate Orchard certainly gives them somebody that has experience in this league and can come in and play if needed and if necessary. I think the other big piece of news from the Packers practices, it seems like Aaron Jones has a legitimate chance to play. I think that's probably a game ahead of what we were expecting, right? Nothing set in stone yet, and it's still. If I were betting today, I would still say that it's more likely that they give him the bye week to rest it just another week, because why the heck not at this point? Aaron Jones is so incredibly important to the team, and getting him that this week of rest and then the bye week as well just seems like it would make so much sense. And Matt LaFleur did mention in his press conference that that bye week coming up will play a part in that decision as well. But when you watch him in some of the practice clips that were posted from the media, he looked good. He looked really good. And if he's ready to play, I mean, you certainly aren't going to hold him back, if he looks 100% and ready to go. So we will see. But I think the good news here is, at minimum at this point, Jones is going to be ready to go after the bye week. And there's a chance that he could play this upcoming weekend as well. So that is some good news as well. Speaking of good news, if you are watching football on Thanksgiving, I think overall, as a Packer fan, you have to be fairly satisfied with the results, right? Bears over Lions may seem like a fairly nondescript victory in the end, and you might say, you know what, that just makes it more likely that the Lions get the number one pick, and that's maybe not the best thing. I actually think this is a pretty solid result if you're the Packers. So first of all, yes, I think it's safe to say that the Lions are easily the leader in the clubhouse at this point for that number one overall pick. I don't think that should scare anyone. First of all, this is a Lions team that has said, and I don't necessarily believe them, but that they believe in Jared Goff and that they want to give him a couple years to see if he can make things work in Detroit. If that's the case, that's fantastic. We'll see if that remains the case. Number two, even if they stay at number one, this isn't the greatest of quarterback classes. Now, I'll be fully transparent. I have not watched these quarterbacks in any sort of depth, but at least the initial sort of intel is that this isn't one of these top-tier quarterback classes. That's not to say that you can't end up with great quarterbacks, right? You go back to Trubisky, Mahomes, and that entire draft class, and Deshaun Watson, and that wasn't supposed to be the top tier draft class either, which is why nobody went number one overall. But of course, Mahomes and up until pre this season, Deshaun Watson ended up being great. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't stumble upon a great quarterback. But I think more importantly for the Lions, that team is completely devoid of overall talent right now. They need more than hitting on a number one overall pick to be ready to compete. So, and again, they're going to end up with a top 5 pick almost no matter what, and likely the number 1 pick almost no matter what. So not concerned about that. On the flip side, this pushes the Bears a little bit down. I know they don't have a first round pick, but pushes them down even further in the second round. And, maybe, just maybe, gives a little bit more credence to maybe keeping a Matt Nagy or a Ryan Pace or keeping things status quo. I don't think that's necessarily going to be the case either, but we'll see, right? And overall, I don't think that this is too major of a game that flips anything much in the NFC North. But overall, I don't think you're too disappointed with a Bears win over the Lions. But then the more important ones, right? Raiders over Cowboys. I still think it's safe to say at this point that Green Bay is the expected favorite to win the division. Yes, they're only a couple games up on Minnesota. Yes, Minnesota has a pretty easy schedule the remainder of the way, including, and they play each other again, right? And right now, Minnesota has that tiebreaker. And if they win against Green Bay next time, then yeah, that's very much in doubt. But at this point, Green Bay's the favorite to win the division. If that's the case, you are fighting the three other division winners to see who gets seeding. And seeding is going to be incredibly important. Now, obviously, the one seed, insanely important getting that bye. Even if you don't get that, you want to avoid that number 4 seed at all costs. And the reason for that is, in all likelihood, the number 5 team is either going to be the LA Rams or the Arizona Cardinals. And that's going to be a massively tough opponent as a first week playoff opponent, right? Not to say that, a potential Minnesota-San Francisco matchup, if they end up being the 6 and 7 seeds, which is where things are at right now, not to say that those couldn't be hard either in the first round, but I don't think there's anyone debating if you had to, pick right now, would you rather face the runner-up in the NFC West, or the 49ers or the Vikings, who do you want to face? I think everyone would just about say, I want to avoid either the Rams or Cardinals, whatever team that ends up being. So it's very important that you stay away from that number 4 seed. And because of that, it's very important that a team like the Cowboys gets a loss, right? And it certainly pushes them further down in those standings. And it looks like the Cowboys in the NFC East could be the one that ends up being the 4 seed. And again, the hope for Green Bay is that they can compete for that 1. If not, maybe they're the 2. But it potentially gives them a little bit of leeway where if they do drop a couple games, you're not looking at like, oh my goodness, that means we're going to have to face the Rams or the Cardinals in that potential, opening wildcard weekend. So that is a nice, way to celebrate Thanksgiving, if you will, is seeing the Cowboys lose to the Raiders and give Green Bay some hope that, some even better odds that they aren't the 4 seed. And then you get Bills over Saints. And I get, we just talked about this, right? The Packers are hoping to win the NFC North and compete for the number 1 seed. At this point, as a Packer fan, you're certainly not thinking, I hope we get in the playoffs, right? If Green Bay doesn't get in the playoffs, some major stuff went really, really wrong to end the season. Like really wrong. Like they were 8-2 a week ago. To not get in the playoffs would be insane. However, it's always nice when you can kind of get a little bit more clarity of where your kind of playoff odds lie. And with a Saints loss, especially with the Saints having the tiebreaker, it guarantees that Green Bay only has to go 4-2 the remainder of the season to clinch a playoff berth. So the Saints losing definitely helps Green Bay's, sort of magic number of at least getting in the playoffs, right? So overall, decent day. Lions lose, Bears pick up a win, which is, again, doesn't really mean a whole heck of a lot. Cowboys lose, making it likely that the NFC North champ is either going to be the 1, 2, or 3 seed, or at least more likely. And then again, the Saints lose, which makes it all the more likely that Green Bay ends up in the playoffs. So a decent day of football, even if 2 of the 3 games were pretty lousy overall. I guess Bears Lions at least ended up being, somewhat, close at the end and things like that. Just not a great football game, right? Raiders Cowboys was great. And then Bills Saints was just a, complete nothing. But overall, decent day of football and certainly some things that broke the Green Bay Packers way. And that brings me to my other topic for today, which is the state of the NFL. I think you know by now, I love football. I love the Packers, and I love watching these games every Sunday, Monday night, Thursday night. I mean, put on NFL football, and I'll be there, and I'll be watching. And for the most part, I'm going to love every second of it. But it is getting a lot harder to watch some of the product that's on the field right now. And that's not to do with having to see Andy Dalton and Mitch Trubisky and Jared Goff and those sort of quarterbacks on Thanksgiving. This is to do with the NFL officiating and how they are officiating the game, how they are stewards of the game of football. I talked about this with Aaron Nagler a couple weeks, maybe about a month ago, actually, on Let's Talk Football on Cheesehead TV. But the NFL as stewards of the game of football are doing a crappy job of managing the game. And you look at taunting and roughing the passer, figuring out what the heck a catch is or an interception is in certain situations, like Darnell Savage a week ago, pass interference and illegal contact, calling penalties different in the regular season than in the postseason. Yeah, things that are a penalty now you get in the postseason, as we saw last year, and it's not even remotely called the same. I just want some level of consistency. And Sean Hochuley's crew, again, calling the center for the head, like, you can't have one referee crew that's just going to decide to emphasize one thing in the play in the penalty book, and like every other referee is just not going to call anything at all. And it's just that lack of consistency is a big piece of it. But then it's what the NFL emphasizes. This taunting crap, the point by Clyde Edwards-Helaire a week ago was just insane. Like, just some of the stuff. This is not what you want to be talking about or watching in a football game. You want to see these players compete. You want to see them having fun. You want to see them have that energy and the passion for the game of football. Every time we look at which players we want to see go in the Hall of Fame, we are yelling, screaming, and celebrating about the players who had this insane passion for the game. And a lot of these guys are the ones that probably would have been taunting and just being insanely involved and passionate about the game of football. I want to see that. And I'm not asking you to turn the other way if somebody's doing something that's, legitimate taunting and being a jerk, but the points or just the quick, flex or you made a play. I mean, come on. Like, we're going to give 15-yard penalties all the time for this stuff. It is absolutely ridiculous. The roughing the passer stuff. Listen, you have broken me to the point of even now when I see a defender like put all of his body weight on the quarterback, I'm like, all right, that's going to be a penalty. Like, I'm even like, as much as I hate it, I'm like, okay, I can understand we're protecting these quarterbacks, but the grazing of the helmets, the just ridiculous stuff that is called as roughing the passer is just insane. It gives defensive players no opportunity to basically hit the quarterback at all. And again, it waters down and makes the game of football worse. What's a catch? What's an interception? We're still debating that for years. You have to figure out a way to better define what a catch is in your sport. It just has to happen. And then the other thing that I want to talk about really quick is that the pass interference and illegal contact stuff, because we're seeing some of the comments this year of like, oh, why are some of these quarterbacks struggling? Well, it's the cover two shell and stuff like that. You watch the tape. And defensive backs are once again getting away with a lot of contact on the back end, past 5 yards. And you're seeing defenders get away with it more and more, probably because referees have to focus on taunting and roughing the passer and everything else that's emphasized outside of this. And because of that, you're seeing receivers get mugged more downfield. You're seeing now 2 safeties over the top, and it's making it much harder for quarterbacks to complete passes down the field, and they have to take all these little checkdowns and things like that. Now, inherently, that makes the game a lot of times harder to watch because we're not being able to see a lot of these big explosive pass plays, and you end up with a lot of just, check down, running play, check down, and it's just not as an exciting brand of football. But here's where the issue comes in. What will likely happen at some point, maybe this offseason, maybe the next offseason, is the NFL will say, we need to emphasize pass interference and illegal contact again, like we did a couple years ago. And what happened? For the first month, it was near unwatchable because every play was a penalty. Just call it consistently and stick with it. And I'm not saying you have to call it on every player, things like that, but when a player is getting completely mugged at the 10-yard mark, call it a couple times to let hey, we're going to call this and stick with that so that teams know. Now, again, teams are getting away with it and away with it and away with it. It's not getting called. I mean, I don't think we've seen an illegal contact penalty this. I know we've seen pass interference. I know we've seen holding. I don't know that there's been a Packer game that I remember an illegal contact. It's just barely called right now. And again, my bigger thing is it's now going to get emphasized at some point because they want more explosive plays, and then it's going to get called a billion times and it's going to completely suck. Again, the stewards of the game are not doing their job to make this the best game that it can possibly be. And then again, the postseason stuff too, the Tampa Bay game a season ago where, the Bucs would get away with a ton of stuff. And I'm not saying, Green Bay hasn't had their benefit of calls here and there too. And I'm not saying that Green Bay lost that game because of the penalties. I don't think it's specifically that, but you just want to see some level of consistency and you don't see that right now. And that's frustrating. that's my spiel on the state of the NFL. I'm frustrated overall. I'll be tuning in on Sunday, of course, because I love the game of football. I overall love, the NFL and the idea of the NFL and Sunday ticket and all of the stuff that goes with it. I just wish that they could clean up the game and make it a bit more watchable and make it the product that everyone really wants it to be. Not a bunch of taunting and roughing the passer penalties and what's a catch and reviewing a play for 40 minutes to figure out if he had 2 feet plus a football move plus possession. Like, it's a bit much right now, and I wish it was a little bit cleaner and a little bit better. Thanks so much for joining me. Always appreciate it. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.